Marcus Chen adjusted his formal black suit one final time as he stood before the mirror in his modest apartment. The fabric felt foreign against his scarred skin, a sharp contrast to the military fatigues that had been his second skin for 23 years. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he pinned the small, unassuming medal to his lapel, the only decoration he would wear tonight. Most people wouldn't recognize it, and that was exactly how he preferred it. The medal was simple, a silver star surrounded by a black border with two crossed swords beneath it. No fancy ribbons, no gleaming gold, just cold metal that carried the weight of memories he tried every day to forget. The Battle of Kepler Station, the last stand at Proxima Centauri, the rescue mission at the edge of the galaxy that had cost him everything and saved everyone. "Dad, are you ready?" Sarah's voice called through the apartment, musical and bright. At 19, she had inherited her mother's gentle spirit and her father's stubborn determination. Her twin brother David appeared in the doorway, tall and lean like Marcus had been in his youth, wearing the crisp white uniform of a first-year Galactic Academy cadet. "You clean up nice, old man," David grinned, though his eyes held the same concern that had been there for months. Ever since Marcus had retired from the Terran Defense Force, his children worried about him. The transition from soldier to civilian father wasn't going smoothly. Marcus forced a smile. "Your mother would have been proud tonight." The words came out rougher than he intended. Alina had died in a transport accident 3 years ago, never seeing her children graduate or achieve their dreams of joining the academy. "She would have been proud of all of us," Sarah said softly, adjusting David's collar with the practiced ease of someone who had been taking care of the family since she was 16. "Especially you. The Galactic Academy's Parents' Gala isn't exactly a small event." That was an understatement. The Academy's annual gala brought together the most important figures in known space. Politicians, military leaders, wealthy merchants, and influential families from dozens of worlds. Marcus felt completely out of place among them, but his children had earned their spots at the Academy through merit, not connections. He wouldn't miss their moment for anything. The transport ride to the Academy was quiet. Marcus stared out the window as Earth fell away beneath them, replaced by the star-filled void of space. The Academy station hung in orbit like a massive crystal, its transparent walls reflecting the light of distant suns. Ships from across the galaxy docked at its ports, bringing dignitaries and families from every corner of civilized space. "Nervous?" David asked as their transport approached the docking bay. "Terrified," Marcus admitted with a weak laugh. "Give me a battlefield over a ballroom any day." The Academy's main hall was breathtaking. Crystalline walls offered a panoramic view of space, while floating platforms created multiple levels for the hundreds of guests. Beings from dozens of species mingled in formal attire, their conversations creating a low hum that echoed through the vast space. Servers, both organic and robotic, moved gracefully between groups, carrying trays of exotic foods and drinks from across the galaxy. Marcus felt every eye on him as they entered, not because anyone recognized him, but because he looked so clearly out of place. While other parents wore expensive fabrics embedded with light displays or traditional ceremonial robes from their homeworlds, Marcus wore a simple black suit that had cost him a month's pension. His military bearing was obvious to anyone with experience, but here among diplomats and merchants, it made him stand out like a weapon at a peace conference. "There are my star pupils," a familiar voice boomed across the hall. Admiral Thorne approached them, his massive frame impressive even among the diverse crowd. The Velkin had served as David's military strategy instructor and had taken a personal interest in both twins. His four arms moved in the traditional Velkin greeting of respect. "Admiral," David replied formally, though he couldn't hide his pleasure at seeing his mentor. "And this must be the famous Marcus Chen," Thorne said, extending one of his hands. "Your children speak of you constantly. David has your tactical mind and Sarah has your protective instincts." Marcus shook the offered hand, nodding the strength behind the Admiral's grip. "They're good kids. They've earned everything they've achieved." "Indeed they have." Thorne's large black eyes studied Marcus with obvious interest. "I've heard stories about human stubbornness and determination. Your children certainly inherited both traits." Before Marcus could respond, Sarah appeared at his elbow. "Dad, there's someone I want you to meet." She led him across the hall to where a group of her classmates stood with their families. The diversity was stunning. Young beings from the aquatic Nereid homeworld, the insectoid Zephyrians, and several other species Marcus didn't immediately recognize. "Everyone, this is my father, Marcus," Sarah said proudly. The young people turned toward him with polite smiles and curious expressions. Marcus could see them trying to figure out what made him worthy of Sarah's obvious admiration. To them, he was just another parent, probably less impressive than most given his simple clothes and obvious discomfort. "Your daughter is brilliant," said a tall, graceful being with blue-tinted skin and silver hair. "She solved our quantum mechanics problem in half the time it took the rest of us combined." "She gets that from her mother," Marcus replied automatically, the familiar pang of loss hitting him again. "Elena was the smart one in the family." The conversation continued around him, but Marcus found his attention drifting. He watched the other families, noting the easy confidence they showed in this environment. Wealthy merchants discussing trade routes with military officers, diplomats sharing gossip about peace negotiations, scientists debating the latest discoveries. This was their world, and he was an intruder. A commotion near the main entrance caught his attention. A group of beings he didn't recognize were entering the hall, their presence causing whispers throughout the crowd. They were tall and slender, with pale skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Their formal robes were decorated with intricate patterns that hurt to look at directly. "The Dominion delegation," someone whispered nearby. "I didn't expect them to attend." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The Stellar Dominion had been neutral during the recent conflicts, but their reputation was anything but peaceful. They were known for their advanced technology and their ruthless expansion into territories previously thought uninhabitable. Most concerning was their attitude toward other species. They viewed themselves as naturally superior and made no effort to hide it. The lead figure of the delegation was clearly someone of importance. Other delegates stepped aside as he moved through the crowd, their body language showing a mixture of respect and fear. He was tall even for his species, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to catalog everything around him. When those eyes fell on Marcus, they lingered for a moment before moving on. "Dad, you okay?" David had appeared at his side, concern evident in his voice. "Fine," Marcus said, though he continued watching the Dominion delegation. Something about their presence felt wrong, like a storm approaching on a clear day. The evening progressed with speeches and presentations. Marcus listened as Academy officials praised the achievements of the graduating class and outlined plans for expanded cooperation between member worlds. The twins were both recognized for academic excellence, and Marcus felt a fierce pride watching them stand before the assembled dignitaries. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was building. The Dominion delegation remained separate from the rest of the crowd, observing rather than participating. Their leader, someone had mentioned his name as High Chancellor Veridian, seemed particularly interested in the military officers present, studying them with an intensity that made Marcus's old combat instincts begin to stir. As the formal presentations ended and the crowd began to mingle again, Marcus found himself near one of the massive windows overlooking space. The view was spectacular, but it also reminded him uncomfortably of the bridge of a warship. Too many battles had been fought in spaces just like this. "Impressive view, isn't it?" The voice was cultured, with an accent Marcus couldn't place. He turned to find High Chancellor Veridian standing beside him, seemingly having appeared from nowhere. "It is," Marcus replied carefully, his instincts on high alert. "I understand your children are among the Academy's top performers," Veridian continued, his pale eyes studying Marcus with unconcealed interest. "You must be very proud." "I am. Such potential in the young, such possibilities for the future." Veridian's smile was cold. "Tell me, Mr. Chen, what do you do for a living?" The question was casual, but Marcus heard the probe beneath it. "I'm retired." "Retired from what, if you don't mind me asking?" Marcus met the alien's gaze steadily. "Military service." "Ah, a soldier." Veridian's tone suggested he found this amusing. "How quaint. I assume you served in some local conflict, perhaps border security." The dismissive tone sent a flash of anger through Marcus, but he kept his voice level. "Something like that." "The Dominion has always been curious about human military capabilities," Veridian continued. "Your species has such a reputation for persistence, though I suspect the reality is somewhat less impressive than the stories suggest." Before Marcus could respond, Admiral Thorne appeared beside them. The Velkin's usually jovial expression was deadly serious as he looked at Veridian. "High Chancellor," Thorne said formally. I wasn't aware the Dominion had interests in Academy functions. We have interests in many things, Admiral, Viridian replied smoothly, particularly in understanding our neighbor's capabilities. Speaking of which, I was just discussing human military service with Mr. Chen here. Perhaps you could satisfy my curiosity about human combat doctrine. Thorne's black eyes flicked to Marcus, and something passed between them, a recognition that made the Admiral straighten slightly. I think human military doctrine speaks for itself, Chancellor. Results tend to be more informative than speculation. Indeed, Viridian's smile grew colder. Though I suspect actual human military achievements are rather modest compared to the propaganda. After all, what could a species with such limited technology and resources really accomplish against serious opposition? The insult was clear, and Marcus felt his hands clench at his sides. Around them, other conversations had stopped as people sensed the tension building. David and Sarah appeared at the edge of his vision, their faces concerned. Human military achievements are well documented, Thorne said carefully, though perhaps not widely publicized. Oh, I've read the reports, Viridian waved dismissively. Border skirmishes, patrol actions, defensive measures, hardly the stuff of legend. No offense intended, of course, Mr. Chen. I'm sure you served admirably in whatever capacity you were assigned. Marcus took a slow breath, feeling the familiar calm that came before combat. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried clearly through the sudden silence around them. None taken, Chancellor, though I should mention that you might want to check those reports again. Some of the details might surprise you. Really? Viridian's eyebrows rose in mock curiosity. And what details would those be? Marcus reached up and touched the small medal on his lapel. The simple gesture seemed to draw every eye in the immediate area. Well, for starters, you might want to look up the Battle of Kepler Station, or the defense of Proxima Centauri. But if you really want specifics, Marcus met Viridian's gaze directly, you might find the reports on the rescue at Thanatos particularly educational. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Admiral Thorne's forearms went rigid at his sides. Several other military officers who had been nearby turned sharply toward Marcus, their expressions shifting from polite interest to something approaching shock. Even some of the civilian delegates seemed to recognize the name. But it was Viridian's reaction that was most telling. The High Chancellor's pale face went completely white, and his confident smile faltered for the first time since Marcus had met him. Thanatos, Viridian repeated quietly, and now there was something like uncertainty in his voice. You've heard of it, Marcus observed. It wasn't a question. The silence stretched out, filled with tension so thick it was almost visible. Marcus could see his children watching from across the room, confusion and concern written across their faces. They had no idea what was happening, but they could sense that something fundamental had just shifted. Admiral Thorne was the first to break the silence. Mr. Chen, he said slowly, his voice filled with something that might have been awe, I think we need to talk. But before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the Academy station. Emergency lights flashed red, and the calm atmosphere of the gala shattered as beings throughout the hall began looking around in panic. An authoritative voice echoed through the station's communication system. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Unknown vessels have entered Academy space and are not responding to hails. All military personnel report for duty immediately. Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with combat alerts. Without thinking, he was already moving toward the nearest exit, his mind automatically calculating the fastest route to whatever command center the Academy maintained. Behind him, he could hear David and Sarah calling his name, but his attention was focused on more immediate concerns. Mr. Chen, wait! Admiral Thorne caught up with him in the corridor outside the main hall. Where are you going? To help, Marcus replied simply. That's what soldiers do. This isn't your fight, Thorne said, though his tone suggested he understood why Marcus couldn't simply stand by. It is now, Marcus replied grimly. My children are on this station. Through the transparent walls of the corridor, they could see ships moving in the distance. They were sleek, predatory vessels that Marcus didn't recognize, but their aggressive formation made their intentions clear. This wasn't a diplomatic visit. As they reached the Academy's command center, Marcus could hear the frantic communications between station personnel and the approaching vessels. The unknown ships were demanding immediate surrender of all Academy personnel and threatening to destroy the station if their demands weren't met. "Who are they?" someone was asking. "Unknown configuration," came the reply, but the technology signatures suggest Dominion design. Marcus and Thorne exchanged a look. Around them, Academy security personnel were preparing for the worst, but Marcus could see immediately that they were woefully unprepared for actual combat. The Academy was an educational institution, not a military base. "How long until backup arrives?" Thorne asked one of the officers. "At least 6 hours for the nearest patrol," was the grim response. "Maybe longer if they're engaged elsewhere." 6 hours. Marcus looked around the command center, taking in the faces of people who were trying to project confidence while dealing with something far beyond their normal experience. Then he looked through the viewport at the station's civilian population, thousands of families, students, and staff who had no defense against whatever was coming. That was when High Chancellor Veridian appeared in the command center, no longer wearing his earlier confident demeanor. He moved directly to Marcus, his pale face tight with something that might have been fear. "Mr. Chen," he said quietly, "I believe we need to discuss your service record in more detail." Marcus looked at him for a long moment, then at the approaching ships, then back at Veridian. "I think it's a little late for that conversation, Chancellor." But even as he spoke, Marcus was already planning. He couldn't let these people face whatever was coming unprepared. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a cold voice was reminding him that this was exactly the kind of situation he had trained his entire adult life to handle. The simple war veteran who had just wanted to watch his children succeed was gone. In his place stood something much more dangerous, a man who had faced impossible odds before and found a way to win. The battle for Academy Station was about to begin, and Marcus Chen was no longer just a proud father attending a gala. He was back in his element, and the enemy was about to learn exactly why the name, Thanatos, made even High Chancellors go pale. The Academy's command center erupted into controlled chaos as more details about the attacking force filtered in. Marcus watched the tactical displays with professional interest, his mind automatically cataloging the enemy's formation and probable intentions. 12 ships in a standard attack pattern, moving with the precision that spoke of military training rather than pirates or raiders. "They're not responding to any communication attempts," reported a young Zephyrian officer, her insect-like features tense with concentration. "But they're broadcasting some kind of signal on all frequencies." "Put it through," ordered Commander Hayes, the Academy's security chief. She was a veteran herself, Marcus could tell, but her experience was clearly in law enforcement rather than military combat. The signal that filled the command center was chilling in its clarity. A synthetic voice, emotionless and precise, delivered a simple message. "Academy Station, you are harboring individuals wanted by the hegemony for crimes against the natural order. Surrender these individuals immediately or face the consequences." The hegemony, Admiral Thorne's massive form straightened with recognition. "I thought they were just rumors." "What's the hegemony?" Commander Hayes asked, but her question was lost in the sudden activity around the command center. Marcus felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. The hegemony wasn't just rumors. They were the Dominion's secret military arm, the force used when political pressure and economic manipulation weren't enough. Their existence was officially denied, but anyone who had spent real time in the outer systems knew better. "Commander Hayes," Marcus said quietly, moving to her side, "you need to evacuate the civilian areas immediately." "And you are?" Hayes looked him up and down, taking in his simple civilian clothes and obvious lack of official authority. "Someone who's dealt with the hegemony before," Marcus replied grimly. "They don't make empty threats and they don't take prisoners." Before Hayes could respond, the station shuddered as something struck its outer hull. Emergency alarms began blaring even louder, and damage reports started flooding in from across the Academy. "They're using some kind of energy weapon," reported another officer. "Minimal damage so far, but they're testing our shields." Marcus moved to one of the tactical displays, his fingers dancing over controls he hadn't touched in 3 years. The muscle memory was still there, and within seconds he had a clearer picture of what they were facing than anyone else in the room. 12 attack cruisers hegemony configuration, he announced to the room. They're not here to destroy the station. They want something specific. The energy strikes are just to demonstrate their capabilities. How do you know that? Hayes demanded. Instead of answering, Marcus turned to High Chancellor Viridian, who had been standing silently near the back of the command center. Chancellor, I think it's time you told us exactly why the hegemony is interested in Academy Station. Viridian's pale face had gone even whiter, and his earlier arrogance had completely evaporated. This was not supposed to happen. They assured me it would remain a diplomatic matter. What was supposed to remain diplomatic? Admiral Thorne moved closer, his forearms positioned in a way that suggested barely controlled aggression. The information gathering, Viridian admitted reluctantly. The Dominion has been concerned about certain military developments in this sector. We received reports about individuals with extensive combat experience attending Academy functions. Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. You were here to identify military veterans. Someone leaked the guest list, and the hegemony saw an opportunity. Not just any veterans, Viridian said, his voice barely above a whisper. Specific ones, individuals who might have knowledge of classified defense strategies or advanced tactics. Another impact shook the station, stronger this time. Through the viewports, Marcus could see the hegemony ships moving into a closer formation. They were preparing for something more aggressive than warning shots. Dad, Sarah's voice cut through the command center noise as she and David burst through the emergency doors. What's happening? The teachers told us to find you. Marcus turned to see his children, still wearing their formal clothes from the gala, their faces scared but determined. Behind them came a stream of other students and their families, all looking for someone in authority to tell them what to do. Commander, Marcus said urgently to Hayes, you need to start evacuation procedures now. The hegemony doesn't care about civilian casualties. We can't evacuate, Hayes replied grimly. The civilian transports aren't designed for emergency departure, and those ships out there would intercept anything we launch. Marcus studied the tactical display again, noting the hegemony ship's positions and probable firing solutions. The Academy station was essentially trapped. Too many civilians to evacuate quickly, not enough military assets to fight back effectively, and an enemy that had already demonstrated they were willing to use force. There might be another option, he said slowly, an idea beginning to form in his mind. What kind of option? Admiral Thorne asked. Marcus looked around the command center, taking in the faces of people who were depending on him to find a solution. Then his eyes fell on his children, and his resolve hardened. The hegemony is here for specific individuals. They're not going to destroy the station and risk diplomatic consequences unless they absolutely have to. He paused, meeting Viridian's frightened gaze. But they will keep escalating until they get what they want. You're suggesting we hand over whoever they're looking for? Hayes sounded horrified. No, Marcus replied calmly. I'm suggesting we give them exactly what they came for. Before anyone could ask what he meant, the communication system crackled to life again. This time the voice was different, organic rather than synthetic, with the cold precision that Marcus recognized from his worst nightmares. Academy Station, this is Hegemon Commander Vex of the Hegemony Fleet. You have exactly 1 hour to surrender the individuals we seek, or we will begin systematic destruction of your facility. Be aware that we have identified several persons of interest among your current population. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in tense silence. Marcus could feel everyone looking at him, waiting for him to explain his plan. Commander Hayes, he said formally, I need to speak with that hegemony commander. Absolutely not, Admiral Thorne interjected. Whatever you're thinking, Chen, it's too dangerous. Marcus turned to face the Velkin Admiral, and for the first time since the crisis began, he allowed some of his true nature to show through his civilian facade. The change was subtle but unmistakable. His posture straightened, his expression hardened, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Admiral, with respect, you have no idea what you're dealing with. The hegemony doesn't negotiate, they don't show mercy, and they don't make mistakes. But they also follow very specific protocols, and those protocols can be exploited. What are you talking about? Hayes demanded. Marcus moved to the communications console and began inputting commands. I'm talking about the fact that Hegemon Commander Vex is going to get a very unpleasant surprise when he realizes exactly who he's dealing with. The communication channel opened, and Marcus's voice carried clearly across space to the Hegemony fleet. "Commander Vex, this is Academy Station. I understand you're looking for someone specific." The response came immediately, cold and confident. "Indeed we are. Several someones, in fact, individuals with extensive military experience who might pose a threat to hegemony interests. You will identify and surrender these individuals immediately." "I see," Marcus replied calmly. "And what if I told you that you've already found exactly what you're looking for?" There was a pause, and when Vex spoke again, there was a hint of curiosity in his voice. "Explain." "Marcus Chen, Colonel, Terran Defense Force, retired, service number 2847 Delta 9. Marcus's voice took on the formal cadence of a military briefing. "Tactical specialist, small unit operations, deep space reconnaissance. I believe I'm on your list." Another pause, longer this time. Marcus could imagine the frantic activity aboard the Hegemony flagship as they cross-referenced his information with their target database. "Colonel Chen," Vex's voice had changed subtly, taking on a tone of professional interest. "Yes, you are indeed on our list, though I must admit we expected you to be more difficult to locate." "I've been retired for 3 years," Marcus replied. "I came here to watch my children graduate. I wasn't exactly hiding." "Your children?" There was something like amusement in Vex's voice now. "How touching. It seems the famous human family bonds are as strong as reported." Marcus felt ice form in his veins at the implied threat, but he kept his voice level. "What do you want, Commander?" "Straight to business. I appreciate that." Vex paused, and Marcus could hear background voices on the Hegemony channel. "Colonel Chen, your tactical innovations during the Thanatos incident cost the Hegemony significant resources. Certain parties would very much like to discuss your methodologies with you." "And if I refuse?" "Then Academy Station and everyone aboard it becomes a regrettable casualty of your stubbornness. The Hegemony has no patience for unnecessary complications." Around the command center, Marcus could see the faces of people beginning to understand what was happening. He was being offered a choice: surrender himself to save everyone else, or watch innocent people die for his refusal to cooperate. "Dad, no." Sarah had moved close enough to hear the conversation, her voice tight with fear and anger. "You can't seriously be considering this." "I need time to think," Marcus told Vex. "You have 15 minutes, the Hegemony commander replied curtly. "After that, we begin demonstrating the consequences of delay." The channel closed, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Marcus turned away from the communications console to find every eye in the room focused on him. "You can't do this," Admiral Thorne said firmly. "We don't negotiate with terrorists and we don't sacrifice our own people." "The Hegemony isn't a terrorist organization," Marcus replied wearily. "They're a military force operating under specific parameters, and right now, those parameters include destroying this station if I don't cooperate." "There has to be another way," David said, his young face set with determination. "The Academy has defenses, right? We can fight them." Commander Hayes shook her head. "The Academy's defensive systems are designed to handle accidents and small-scale threats. Against a full Hegemony battle group, they wouldn't last 10 minutes. Marcus moved back to the tactical display, studying the enemy formation one more time. The Hegemony ships had repositioned themselves into a classic siege pattern, with overlapping fields of fire covering every possible escape route. It was professional work, executed with the kind of precision that spoke of extensive training and experience. "What is this Thanatos incident they mentioned?" Hayes asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer immediately, his attention focused on the display. But Admiral Thorne spoke up, his voice filled with something approaching reverence. "The rescue at Thanatos was a joint operation 3 years ago. A civilian colony had been taken hostage by slavers operating out of the Thanatos system. The rescue force included ships from 6 different worlds, but the tactical coordination was unprecedented." "I've read the reports," another officer added. "The slavers had superior numbers and defensive positions, but the rescue force managed to extract over 10,000 civilians without a single casualty." "The Hegemony was backing the slavers," Marcus said quietly, still studying the tactical display. "They didn't appreciate losing that particular revenue stream." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Marcus could see the pieces falling into place in everyone's minds. Why the hegemony wanted him specifically, why they were willing to threaten an academy station to get him, and why this situation was far more dangerous than a simple pirate raid. "Dad," Sarah moved to his side, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Whatever you're thinking, remember that David and I didn't join the academy to watch our father sacrifice himself for us." "That's exactly why you joined the academy," Marcus replied gently. "To learn how to make the hard choices that protect innocent people." "This isn't your choice to make alone," David added, moving to his other side. "We're family, we make decisions together." Marcus looked at his children, his brilliant, brave, stubborn children who had inherited their mother's compassion and his own refusal to back down from what was right. They were everything he had fought to protect during his military career, everything that made the sacrifices worthwhile. "You're right," he said finally. "This is a family decision, but you need to understand what we're really facing." He turned to address the entire command center, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "The hegemony doesn't make empty threats, and they don't negotiate in good faith. If I surrender myself, there's no guarantee they'll leave the station alone. If I refuse, they'll destroy Academy Station to make a point about the consequences of defying them." "So what are you proposing?" Commander Hayes asked. Marcus smiled grimly, and for the first time since the crisis began, there was something predatory in his expression. "I'm proposing we give the hegemony exactly what they asked for, and exactly what they deserve." Before anyone could ask what he meant, alarms began blaring again. New contacts had appeared on the tactical display, 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of Academy space. But these weren't hegemony vessels. "Terran Defense Force signatures," reported the scanning officer, excitement clear in her voice. "It's the TDF Aurora and 2 escort frigates." Marcus felt his heart skip. The Aurora was Admiral Catherine Shaw's flagship, one of the most advanced vessels in the Terran fleet. If Shaw was here, it meant someone had managed to get word out about the situation. "Commander Vex is hailing us again," reported the communications officer. "Put him through," Marcus ordered, moving back to the communications console. "Colonel Chen," Vex's voice was harder now, with an edge of anger. "Your reinforcements are noted but irrelevant. 3 ships against 12 is hardly favorable odds." "Maybe," Marcus replied calmly, "but you're no longer dealing with just Academy Station personnel. The arrival of additional Terran forces changes nothing. You still have a choice to make, and your time is running out." Marcus looked around the command center one more time, taking in the faces of his children, Admiral Thorne, Commander Hayes, and all the others who were depending on his next decision. Then he looked at High Chancellor Veridian, still cowering near the back of the room. "Commander Vex," Marcus said formally, "I've made my decision, but I have a counter-proposal for you." "I'm listening." Marcus's smile was cold as winter. "Instead of me surrendering to you, why don't you surrender to me? It'll save everyone a lot of time, and I promise you'll find the experience educational." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background noise of the command center seemed to stop as everyone tried to process what they had just heard. When Vex finally spoke, his voice was filled with disbelief and rage. "You dare to threaten the hegemony." "I'm not threatening anyone," Marcus replied pleasantly. "I'm simply pointing out that you might want to reconsider your current course of action. After all, you came here looking for the person responsible for Thanatos. Well, congratulations, you found him. 1 man against an entire battle group. Your human arrogance is astounding." Marcus's smile widened. Who said anything about 1 man? As if responding to his words, the communication system came alive with a new voice, crisp, professional, and absolutely confident. "Hegemony vessels, this is Admiral Shaw of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of Academy space and are ordered to withdraw immediately." Marcus could practically feel Vex's shock across the communication channel. The arrival of TDF ships had changed the tactical situation, but not decisively. 3 against 12 was still poor odds, regardless of the quality difference. "Admiral Shaw," Vex finally replied, his voice carefully controlled. "The hegemony is conducting a lawful operation to apprehend individuals wanted for crimes against the Dominion." "Negative, Commander," The individuals you're referring to are under Terran protection, and Academy Station is neutral territory. You have no authority here. Authority is what you make it, Admiral, and the hegemony has sufficient force to make whatever authority we require. Marcus keyed into the conversation. Commander Vex, before this goes any further, there's something you should know about Admiral Shaw. And what would that be? She was my second in command at Thanatos. The communications channel went dead silent. Marcus could imagine the frantic consultations aboard the Hegemony flagship as they tried to determine if he was bluffing. Admiral Thorne moved to Marcus's side, his massive form radiating approval. Chen, I'm beginning to understand why your children are so proud of you. We're not out of this yet, Marcus replied quietly. Vex is good at his job, and he's not going to be intimidated by psychological warfare alone. So what's the real plan? David asked, moving closer to the conversation. Marcus looked at his son, seeing Alina's intelligence behind his own determination. The real plan is to remind the hegemony why humans have a reputation for being dangerously unpredictable. Before he could elaborate, new alarms began sounding throughout the academy. But these weren't threat warnings, they were arrival alerts. More ships dropping out of hyperspace, reported the scanning officer, excitement and confusion mixing in her voice. Multiple contacts. I'm reading Velkin signatures, Zephyrian cruisers, and... She paused, checking her readings again. Nereid battle pods, it's a full multinational force. Marcus felt a grin spread across his face. Actually, Commander Vex, I think I should correct something I said earlier. When I said you'd found the person responsible for Thanatos, I was being modest. You've actually found all of us. The tactical display now showed over 20 ships in Academy space, representing half a dozen different worlds. The hegemony's 12-ship advantage had evaporated in a matter of minutes. This is impossible, Vex's voice carried across the channel, confusion replacing his earlier confidence. How did you coordinate this response so quickly? Marcus exchanged looks with Admiral Thorne, who was grinning broadly with all four arms crossed. Commander, you made a critical error in your intelligence gathering. You assumed humans fight alone. The Thanatos rescue wasn't a human operation, Admiral Shaw's voice added from her flagship. It was a joint effort involving every species currently represented in Academy space, and we've all been looking forward to the opportunity to repay the hegemony's hospitality. The command center erupted in cheers as the full implications became clear. The hegemony force that had seemed so overwhelming minutes before was now heavily outnumbered by ships carrying veterans of the most successful military operation in recent history. Marcus felt his children's hands on his shoulders as they flanked him, their pride obvious. Around the command center, Academy personnel were shaking hands and embracing as the immediate threat faded. But Marcus knew the situation wasn't over yet. The hegemony might be outnumbered, but they were still dangerous, and Commander Vex wasn't the type to surrender easily. The real test was just beginning. The silence on the communication channel stretched for nearly a full minute as Commander Vex processed the rapidly changing tactical situation. Marcus watched the tactical display, noting how the hegemony ships had tightened their formation, a defensive posture that suggested Vex was reassessing his options. This changes nothing, Vex finally transmitted, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The hegemony's business is with specific individuals. The presence of additional ships does not alter our legitimate authority. Marcus keyed the communication system. Commander, I think you're missing the bigger picture here. This isn't just about arresting a few veterans. Your presence in Academy space is an act of aggression against neutral territory. Neutral territory that harbors enemies of the Dominion, Vex shot back. Actually, a new voice joined the channel, smooth and diplomatic. Academy space is protected under the Galactic Education Accords, which the Dominion signed 12 years ago. Marcus recognized the voice immediately, Ambassador Chenokaffer of the Galactic Council, whose ship had apparently arrived with the multinational fleet. Her presence meant this incident was about to become a major diplomatic crisis. Ambassador, Vex's tone became more cautious. The hegemony is operating under emergency protocols to apprehend dangerous individuals. Dangerous individuals attending their children's graduation ceremony. Ambassador Chenokaffer's voice carried a note of amused skepticism. Commander, I think you may have exceeded your authority here." While the diplomatic exchange continued, Marcus noticed increased activity among the hegemony ships. Their energy signatures were fluctuating in a pattern he recognized from his intelligence briefings. "Admiral Shaw," he transmitted on a private channel, "the hegemony ships are charging their weapons. They're preparing for something." Shaw's response came immediately. "Confirmed. All ships are to maintain ready status but do not engage unless fired upon." Marcus felt the familiar pre-combat tension settling over the command center. Around him, Academy personnel were trying to maintain their professional composure, but he could see the fear in their eyes. Most of them had never been in an actual combat situation. "Dad," Sarah moved to his side, keeping her voice low. "What are they really after? This seems like an awful lot of trouble just to arrest a few retired soldiers." It was a good question, and one that had been bothering Marcus since the crisis began. The hegemony was risking major diplomatic consequences by attacking Academy Station. There had to be something more valuable at stake than simple revenge for a 3-year-old military operation. "Chancellor Veridian," Marcus called to the Dominion official, who was still hovering uncertainly near the back of the command center. "I think it's time you told us everything about why you're really here." Veridian's pale face went even whiter. This was not supposed to escalate to violence. The Dominion leadership assured me this would remain a diplomatic matter." "What diplomatic matter?" Admiral Thorne moved closer, his massive form intimidating even in the spacious command center. "The intelligence gathering," Veridian admitted reluctantly. "The Dominion has been concerned about the development of new tactical doctrines among the younger species. The Thanatos operation represented a significant advancement in multi-species cooperation." Marcus felt pieces clicking together. "You weren't here to arrest veterans, you were here to study us. To understand how your species manages to inspire such loyalty from other races," Veridian confirmed. "The human ability to coordinate multi-species operations is unprecedented. The Dominion leadership wanted to understand the mechanisms involved." "So they could counter them," David said, his young face hard with understanding. Before Veridian could respond, alarms began blaring again. The tactical display showed the hegemony ships moving into attack formation, their weapons now fully charged. "All ships be advised," Commander Vex's voice carried across the communication channels. "The hegemony is implementing Code 7 protocols. Any interference with our operation will be considered an act of war." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Code 7 was the hegemony's designation for total tactical freedom, permission to use any level of force necessary to complete their mission. It meant Vex had received new orders from his superiors, orders that made the potential diplomatic consequences irrelevant. "Admiral Shaw," Marcus transmitted urgently, "Code 7 means they've been authorized to destroy Academy Station if necessary. They're no longer concerned about civilian casualties." Shaw's response was immediate. "All ships combat alert, prepare for engagement." The multinational fleet began spreading into battle formation, but Marcus could see the tactical problem immediately. Academy Station was positioned between the two forces, making it nearly impossible for Shaw's ships to engage the hegemony without risking damage to the civilian facility. "Commander Hayes," Marcus turned to the Academy security chief, "you need to begin emergency evacuation procedures immediately. Get everyone to the inner sections of the station." "That won't help if they decide to destroy the entire facility," Hayes replied grimly. Marcus studied the tactical display one more time, his mind racing through possibilities. The hegemony had superior positions and no concern for civilian casualties. The multinational fleet had superior numbers but was constrained by the need to protect the Academy. It was a nearly impossible tactical situation. Unless, Marcus began working furiously at the tactical console, pulling up Academy Station's technical specifications. "Unless what?" Admiral Thorne demanded. "Unless we change the rules of engagement entirely." Marcus's fingers danced over the controls, accessing systems he'd studied during his intelligence briefings but never expected to see in person. "Admiral Shaw, are you familiar with Academy Station's construction?" Shaw's voice came back puzzled. "Standard orbital facility design, why?" "Not entirely standard," Marcus replied. a grim smile spreading across his face. The Academy was built using Terran military engineering principles. It has capabilities that aren't widely advertised. Before Shaw could ask what he meant, Marcus activated a series of commands he'd found buried in the station's technical database. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Academy Station began to move. The massive facility, which had appeared to be a fixed orbital platform, started rotating and shifting position. Hidden thruster arrays deployed from what had seemed to be decorative sections, and the station's transparent walls suddenly showed defensive armor plating sliding into place. What the hell? Commander Hayes stared at her own command systems as readouts she'd never seen before began displaying information about weapons systems, defensive shields, and tactical maneuvering capabilities. Academy Station isn't just an educational facility, Marcus explained as he continued working the controls. It's also a fully functional military command center designed to serve as a fallback position if the inner worlds ever came under attack. The tactical display now showed Academy Station as what it truly was, a battle station disguised as a civilian facility, with defensive capabilities that rivaled a heavy cruiser. "This is impossible," Vex's voice carried clearly across the communication channels. "Academy records show no military capabilities." "The records you were allowed to see," Marcus corrected. "Admiral Shaw, I'm transmitting station's true tactical specifications to your fleet." What Shaw saw in those specifications clearly impressed her. "My God, Chen, this thing is a fortress." "It's more than that," Marcus replied, still working at the controls. "It's a command and control center designed to coordinate multinational fleet operations. Every exercise the Academy runs, every simulation the students complete, they're all training for real tactical situations." Around the command center, Academy personnel were staring in shock as their familiar educational facility transformed into something from their worst nightmares, or their most exciting dreams, depending on their perspective. "The students," Sarah said suddenly, "they've been training for this their entire time here without knowing it." Marcus nodded grimly. Every tactical exercise, every strategic simulation, every leadership scenario, it was all preparation for actual combat command. The Academy doesn't just teach theory. David was studying the tactical displays with the intensity of someone recognizing patterns he'd studied, but never seen implemented. The command structure, the communication protocols, even the dining hall arrangements, everything was designed to prepare us for real military operations. Which explains why the hegemony was so interested in Academy graduates, Admiral Thorne added. "You're not just training students, you're creating the next generation of multi-species military leaders." Marcus activated another series of commands, and the Academy's hidden weapon systems came online. Defensive turrets emerged from concealed positions, shield generators powered up to full capacity, and sensor arrays deployed to provide complete tactical coverage of the surrounding space. "Commander Vex," Marcus transmitted to the hegemony force, "I think you'll find your tactical situation has changed significantly." The silence that followed was telling. The hegemony ships had gone from having a significant positional advantage to facing a fully armed battle station supported by a multinational fleet. "This changes nothing," Vex finally replied, though his voice suggested otherwise. "The hegemony's mission remains the same." "Your mission just became suicide," Admiral Shaw cut in. "Stand down immediately or face the consequences." But instead of responding to Shaw, Vex addressed Marcus directly. "Colonel Chen, you're forcing our hand. The hegemony cannot allow Academy Station to become operational as a military facility. It represents too great a threat to Dominion interests." Marcus felt ice forming in his veins. "You're talking about destroying an educational facility filled with civilian families." "I'm talking about eliminating a strategic threat before it can be used against the Dominion. You've made the choice for us, Colonel." The communication channel closed, and Marcus watched in horror as the hegemony ships began moving into attack formation. They were no longer interested in capturing individuals or gathering intelligence. They were preparing to destroy Academy Station entirely, regardless of civilian casualties. "All ships engage at will," Admiral Shaw's voice carried across the tactical channels. "Protect the Academy at all costs." The battle began with a brilliant flash of energy weapons fire as the multinational fleet engaged the hegemony force. But Marcus could see immediately that the geometry was all wrong. The Academy was still positioned between the two forces, limiting the fleet's ability to bring their full firepower to bear. "We need to change position," Marcus announced to the command center. "If we stay here, we're just going to get caught in crossfire." "The station isn't designed for high-speed maneuvering," Commander Hayes protested. "Actually, it is." Marcus was already inputting commands. "But moving a facility this size is going to stress every system we have." Academy Station began accelerating away from its original position, its massive bulk moving with surprising grace through space. The maneuver opened clear firing lanes for Shaw's fleet while positioning the Academy's own weapons for maximum effectiveness. "Hegemony ships are breaking formation," reported the tactical officer. "They're trying to maintain attack positions on the Academy." Marcus watched the enemy ships repositioning, his mind automatically calculating firing solutions and defensive patterns. This was what he'd trained for his entire military career, the moment when tactical theory met deadly reality. "All Academy weapon systems engage designated targets," Marcus ordered. The Academy's hidden weapons opened fire, their energy beams lancing out across space to strike hegemony ships with devastating accuracy. The facility that had appeared to be a peaceful educational center was revealing itself to be one of the most advanced military platforms in known space. "Direct hit on Hegemony Cruiser 7, reported the tactical officer with obvious satisfaction. "Their shields are down to 60%. Around the command center, Academy personnel were working with professional efficiency despite the surreal nature of their situation. The training they'd received in emergency scenarios was proving to be very real combat preparation. "Dad," David appeared at Marcus's side, his Academy uniform now displaying tactical insignia that had been hidden before. "My class has been assigned to auxiliary fire control. We know what we're doing." Sarah was at another console, her fingers moving with practiced ease over controls that Marcus realized were identical to those used on Terran military vessels. "Communications and intelligence coordination," she reported formally. "We're tracking all friendly and enemy positions." Marcus felt a surge of pride as he watched his children take their places in an actual combat situation. The Academy had indeed prepared them for this moment, even if none of them had realized it until now. "Hegemony ships are concentrating fire on our position," Commander Hayes reported. "Shields holding, but they won't last forever under this kind of bombardment." Marcus studied the tactical display, noting the enemy's attack patterns. They were trying to overwhelm the Academy's defenses through concentrated firepower, but their positioning left them vulnerable to attack from the multinational fleet. "Admiral Shaw," Marcus transmitted, "if you can coordinate a flanking maneuver through coordinate 7 Alpha 9, you can catch their main force in crossfire." "Understood. All ships, execute flanking maneuver 7 Alpha 9. The multinational fleet moved with precision that spoke of extensive training and natural cooperation. Ships from 6 different worlds coordinated their attack as if they were a single unified force, their diverse technologies combining into something more powerful than the sum of its parts. "This is what the hegemony really fears," Admiral Thorne observed, watching the display with satisfaction. "Not human military capabilities, but human ability to unite other species in common cause." Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on something else. The hegemony ships were moving into a pattern he recognized from intelligence reports, a desperate gambit used when conventional tactics had failed. "They're preparing for ramming attacks," Marcus announced grimly. "Vex has decided that destroying Academy Station is worth sacrificing his entire force." The tactical situation had just become even more dangerous. Hegemony ships moving at attack speed could cause massive damage even if their weapons had been neutralized. And with civilian families still aboard the Academy, the consequences of a successful ramming attack would be catastrophic. "Can we stop them?" Hayes asked. Marcus looked at the tactical display one more time, his mind racing through possibilities. The Academy's weapons were powerful, but the hegemony ships were armored for exactly this kind of suicide mission. "Not with conventional tactics," he replied slowly. "But the Academy has one more surprise that the hegemony doesn't know about." What kind of surprise? Shaw's voice came across the channel. Marcus's smile was grim as he activated the final series of commands he'd found in the Academy's hidden systems. The kind that explains why humans have a reputation for being dangerously innovative. What happened next would be talked about in tactical academies for generations. Academy Station didn't just defend itself, it attacked. The facility that had appeared to be a fixed platform launched itself directly at the hegemony formation, its massive bulk moving with the speed and precision of a fighter craft. The collision wasn't destructive, it was surgical. Academy Station's reinforced hull and defensive shields allowed it to ram through the hegemony formation, scattering their ships and disrupting their attack patterns without destroying itself in the process. Impossible, Vex's voice carried across space, filled with shock and disbelief. No facility that size could survive a ramming maneuver. Commander, Marcus replied pleasantly, I don't think you fully understand what you're dealing with. Academy Station wasn't just built to train students, it was built to win wars. The battle was effectively over. The hegemony force, scattered and damaged, found themselves surrounded by the multinational fleet with no possibility of completing their mission. Academy Station hung in space like a predatory beast, its weapons trained on the enemy ships. But Marcus knew the real victory wasn't tactical. It was what the battle had revealed about the Academy's true purpose and the capabilities of the next generation of leaders. His children and their classmates had proven themselves in actual combat, demonstrating the kind of multi-species cooperation that made the hegemony so nervous. The question now was what would happen next. The hegemony wouldn't simply forget this defeat, and the Dominion would have to respond to the revelation that Academy Station was far more than it appeared to be. The war that had begun at a graduation gala was just getting started. The aftermath of the battle left Academy Station floating in a debris field of damaged hegemony ships, their hulls scarred by energy weapons and their formations completely broken. Commander Vex's flagship was still intact, but showed significant damage to its propulsion systems and weapons arrays. The other hegemony vessels were in various states of distress, some leaking atmosphere while others drifted powerless through space. Marcus stood in the command center, watching the tactical display as rescue operations began. Despite everything that had happened, the multinational fleet was already moving to assist the damaged hegemony ships. It was a stark demonstration of the difference between the Academy's values and those of their attackers. All hegemony vessels, this is Admiral Shaw, the communication system crackled. Do you require assistance with emergency repairs or medical aid? The silence that followed was telling. Marcus could imagine the confusion aboard the enemy ships as they processed an offer of help from the people they had just tried to destroy. This is unexpected, Commander Vex finally replied, his voice carrying a note of genuine bewilderment. Why would you offer assistance to your enemies? Because that's who we are, Shaw replied simply. Academy Station trains leaders, not conquerors. Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Admiral Thorne standing beside him, the Velkin's 4 arms crossed in a gesture of satisfaction. Your species continues to amaze me, Chen. In the face of unprovoked aggression, your first instinct is still to offer help. It's not just a human instinct, Marcus replied, watching as Nereid medical ships moved to assist damaged hegemony vessels. Look at the rescue operations. Every species here is participating. It was true. Ships from across known space were coordinating rescue efforts with the same precision they had shown during combat. Zephyrian engineers were providing technical assistance. Velkin heavy ships were stabilizing damaged hulls, and human medical teams were preparing to treat injured hegemony personnel. This is what the Dominion fears, Sarah said, appearing at Marcus's other side. Her academy uniform now displayed the full range of tactical insignia that had been hidden during peacetime. Not our weapons or our defenses, but our willingness to help even our enemies. David joined them at the tactical display, his young face serious as he studied the ongoing operations. The tactical doctrine we've been studying all makes sense now. It's not about defeating enemies, it's about converting them. Marcus nodded, feeling proud of his children's understanding. The Academy doesn't just train military leaders, it trains people who can build alliances with former enemies. Colonel Chen, Commander Vex's voice interrupted their conversation. I request permission to come aboard Academy Station. The request sent a ripple of tension through the command center. Allowing the enemy commander aboard the facility they had just tried to destroy seemed like an unnecessary risk. Denied, Admiral Shaw's voice came immediately across the channel. You can conduct any negotiations from your current position. Admiral, with respect, this is not a negotiation, Vex replied formally. This is a surrender. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus felt every eye in the command center turn toward the communication console, waiting to see if they had heard correctly. Say again, Shaw's voice carried clear disbelief. Commander Vex of the Hegemony 7th Fleet formally requests permission to surrender his force to Academy Station Command, Vex repeated, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was saying. We have been thoroughly defeated. Marcus exchanged looks with Admiral Thorne and Commander Hayes. In all his years of military service, he had never heard of a hegemony force surrendering. Their reputation was built on fighting to the last ship rather than accepting capture. Commander, Marcus keyed into the communication system, this is unexpected. The hegemony doesn't surrender. The hegemony has never faced an opponent like Academy Station, Vex replied. Our intelligence reports indicated a civilian educational facility with minimal defensive capabilities. What we encountered was a fully operational battle station crewed by personnel who demonstrated tactical innovation and multi-species coordination beyond anything in our databases. So you're surrendering because we surprised you? Admiral Shaw asked skeptically. Admiral, we are surrendering because we have encountered something that fundamentally challenges our understanding of military doctrine. The hegemony exists to ensure Dominion superiority through the application of overwhelming force. Today, we discovered that force alone is insufficient when facing an enemy that turns educational facilities into strategic weapons and converts students into combat-capable officers. Marcus felt a chill as he processed the implications of Vex's words. The hegemony wasn't just acknowledging military defeat. They were recognizing that their entire strategic philosophy had been proven wrong. Permission granted for Commander Vex to come aboard, Marcus announced after consulting with the other senior personnel. But he comes alone, unarmed, and under escort. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in Academy Station's main docking bay as a hegemony shuttle approached. The facility that had been hosting a graduation gala just hours earlier was now preparing to receive the surrender of one of the galaxy's most feared military forces. Commander Vex was not what Marcus had expected. Instead of the brutal warrior suggested by his reputation, he was a tall, slender being with pale blue skin and intelligent silver eyes. His uniform was functional rather than ostentatious, and he carried himself with the bearing of a professional soldier rather than a fanatic. Colonel Chen, Vex said formally as he was escorted into the docking bay by Academy security personnel. I request formal audience with Academy Station Command. Granted, Marcus replied. Follow me. The walk through Academy Station to the command center was revealing. Vex's eyes took in everything. The hidden weapon ports that had been revealed during combat, the sophisticated communication arrays, the tactical displays that showed real-time coordination with the multinational fleet. But what seemed to interest him most were the Academy personnel themselves. Your crew, Vex observed as they passed a group of students working at repair stations. They're barely adults. Some of them are 19, Marcus replied. Others are older. Age isn't as important as training and dedication. 19, Vex repeated thoughtfully. Our intelligence suggested that Academy Station was staffed by experienced military personnel. It is, but experience comes in many forms. When they reached the command center, Marcus was pleased to see that normal operations had resumed despite the recent battle. Students and faculty worked side by side, coordinating rescue operations and managing the multinational fleet with professional efficiency. Admiral Shaw, Commander Hayes, Admiral Thorne, Marcus made the introductions. This is Commander Vex of the Hegemony 7th Fleet. Vex inclined his head formally to each officer, but his attention was clearly focused on the command center itself. Marcus could see him trying to understand how a facility that appeared to be run by students could have defeated his battle group so decisively. Commander Vex, Admiral Shaw said formally, you mentioned surrender. What exactly are you proposing? The unconditional surrender of all hegemony forces currently in Academy space, Vex replied without hesitation. We acknowledge defeat and request treatment in accordance with galactic military conventions. That's not what I mean, Shaw continued. The hegemony doesn't surrender. What's really going on here? Vex was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes studying the faces around him. When he spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been wonder. Admiral, I have spent my entire adult life serving the hegemony. I have commanded forces in over 30 combat operations, from border skirmishes to major fleet actions. I have never encountered an enemy that offered medical assistance to our wounded while simultaneously demonstrating tactical superiority that rendered our entire doctrine obsolete. You're surrendering because we helped your people, Commander Hayes asked incredulously. I am surrendering because you have demonstrated something that the hegemony believed was impossible, the successful integration of military effectiveness with moral restraint. Our philosophy holds that mercy is weakness, that compromise is defeat, and that only overwhelming force can ensure victory. Vex gestured toward the tactical displays showing ongoing rescue operations. Today, you proved that philosophy wrong. You defeated us decisively while simultaneously offering aid to our wounded. You demonstrated that cooperation between species can create military capabilities superior to anything we can field alone. Most importantly, you showed that educational institutions can be more militarily effective than dedicated warships. Marcus began to understand what Vex was really saying. You're not just surrendering your ships, you're questioning everything the hegemony represents. Precisely, and I suspect I am not alone in that questioning. Today's events will be reported throughout hegemony command structure. Other commanders will want to understand how Academy Station achieved what it achieved. Some of them will reach the same conclusions I have. Admiral Thorne leaned forward, his massive form imposing even in the spacious command center. What conclusions would those be, Commander? That the hegemony's approach to military doctrine is fundamentally flawed. That cooperation is more effective than domination. That turning former enemies into allies is a greater strategic achievement than simply destroying them. The implications were staggering. If Vex was right, the defeat of his fleet could trigger a cascade of questioning throughout hegemony ranks. The organization that had been the Dominion's primary military asset could find itself facing internal dissent on an unprecedented scale. Commander, Marcus said carefully, what you're describing sounds like the beginning of a revolution within hegemony ranks. Not a revolution, Vex corrected. An evolution. The hegemony has always prided itself on adapting successful tactics from defeated enemies. Today, we were defeated by tactics that are fundamentally incompatible with our existing structure. So what happens now? Sarah asked from her position at the communications console. Vex turned toward her, and Marcus was surprised to see something like respect in the hegemony commander's expression. Now, young officer, we learn. My surrender includes a request for my personnel to observe Academy Station operations and training procedures. We want to understand how you achieve what you achieve. You want to study us, David said from his tactical station. The same way the Dominion was trying to study our veterans. No, Vex shook his head firmly. The Dominion wanted to study you in order to counter your capabilities. We want to study you in order to emulate them. The distinction was important, and Marcus could see that everyone in the command center recognized it. The difference between studying an enemy to defeat them and studying an ally to learn from them was the difference between espionage and education. That's quite a request, Admiral Shaw said slowly. You're asking us to reveal our training methods to people who were trying to destroy us an hour ago. I am asking you to demonstrate the same willingness to help former enemies that you have already shown by rescuing our wounded, Vex replied. If Academy Station's philosophy is truly superior to ours, then sharing that philosophy should strengthen it rather than weaken it. Marcus looked around the command center, taking in the faces of the people who would be affected by this decision. His children, Admiral Thorne, Commander Hayes, and dozens of Academy personnel who had just proven themselves in actual combat. Admiral Shaw, Marcus said formally, I recommend we accept Commander Vex's surrender and his request for observer status, but with conditions. What conditions? Shaw asked. First, all hegemony personnel remain under strict supervision. Second, Any information shared is reciprocal. They tell us about Dominion capabilities while learning about ours. Third, this arrangement is subject to immediate termination if there's any sign of deception or bad faith. Vex nodded immediately. Acceptable. I would add one additional condition. Any hegemony personnel who wish to request asylum with Academy forces should be permitted to do so. The request caught everyone off guard. Marcus had expected Vex to negotiate for better treatment of his personnel, not to suggest that some of them might want to defect entirely. You expect defections? Admiral Thorne asked. I expect that once my personnel observe Academy Station operations firsthand, some of them will reach the same conclusions I have reached about the superiority of your approach to military doctrine. They should have the option to serve with forces that share their evolved understanding. Marcus felt a smile spreading across his face. Commander, I think you're going to find that Academy Station is very good at turning former enemies into valuable allies. Colonel, I believe that is exactly what we are counting on. As the formal surrender ceremony was arranged, Marcus found himself standing with his children near the observation deck overlooking the docking bays. Hegemony personnel were being transferred to Academy Station under careful supervision, while medical teams from both sides worked together to treat the wounded. Dad, Sarah said quietly, do you think this is really the end of it, or is this just the beginning of something larger? Marcus watched a group of hegemony officers being escorted by Academy students, noting how both groups seemed to be studying each other with professional interest rather than hostility. I think, sweetheart, that we just witnessed the first battle in a war that's going to be fought with ideas instead of weapons. And if Commander Vex is right about how other hegemony personnel will react to what happened today, then the Dominion is about to face the same choice we offered Vex, David finished. Adapt or become irrelevant. Marcus nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and concern. Academy Station had won a great victory today, but victories often came with unexpected consequences. The revelation of the Academy's true capabilities would change everything, and not everyone in known space would welcome those changes. But as he watched former enemies working together to help the wounded and share knowledge, Marcus couldn't help but feel hopeful. If Academy Station could turn a hegemony fleet commander into an ally in a single day, perhaps there was hope for larger changes as well. The graduation gala that had started this crisis seemed like a lifetime ago. His children were no longer students preparing for theoretical challenges. They were officers who had proven themselves in actual combat. And Marcus himself was no longer a retired veteran trying to blend into civilian life. He was back in his element as a strategic thinker and leader. The question now was what would happen when the larger galaxy learned about Academy Station's transformation from educational facility to military command center. Some would see it as a threat to be eliminated. Others would see it as an opportunity to learn and grow. Marcus suspected that the real test was just beginning. 3 weeks after the battle, Academy Station had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. A joint military and educational facility hosting personnel from over 20 different species, including former hegemony officers who had requested asylum. Marcus stood in the main observation deck, watching the controlled chaos of the largest cultural exchange program ever attempted. The changes were remarkable. What had once been dormitory space was now housing for hegemony defectors who were learning academy protocols alongside regular students. The dining halls had been expanded to accommodate the dietary needs of a dozen additional species. Most significantly, the tactical training centers were running around-the-clock sessions as former enemies studied alongside future leaders of the galactic community. The integration is proceeding better than anyone expected, Admiral Thorne observed, joining Marcus at the observation window. The massive Velkin was reviewing a data pad filled with progress reports. Commander Vex's people are adapting to Academy procedures with remarkable speed. They're motivated, Marcus replied, watching a mixed group of human, hegemony, and Zephyrian students working together on a tactical simulation. Nothing motivates learning like discovering that everything you thought you knew was wrong. Through the transparent walls of the Academy, Marcus could see the permanent presence of the multinational fleet that had remained to protect the station. Ships from a dozen worlds maintained a defensive perimeter, but their presence was as much symbolic as practical. Academy Station had become a symbol of cooperation that both supporters and opponents of galactic unity wanted to control. "Any word from the Dominion leadership?" Marcus asked. Thorne's expression darkened. "Ambassador Chen Okafor received another diplomatic protest yesterday. The Dominion Council is demanding the return of their kidnapped personnel and threatening sanctions against any world that supports Academy Station's new status." "Empty threats." "Probably not. The Dominion has significant economic leverage, and they're not hesitant to use it. Several trading worlds are already feeling pressure to distance themselves from Academy cooperation agreements." Marcus nodded grimly. The political fallout from Academy Station's transformation had been swift and complicated. While the military victory had been decisive, the larger diplomatic consequences were still unfolding. The Dominion was using every tool short of open warfare to isolate Academy Station and pressure the return of defected hegemony personnel. "Dad," Sarah's voice called across the observation deck as she approached with David and a small group of other students. But Marcus noticed that the group now included several young hegemony officers who had been among the first to request asylum. "How are the integration exercises going?" Marcus asked as the group reached him. "Better than expect.